Okay, in this video I want to continue with this notion of the cell phones, and my thesis being my made-up thesis. And again, all of this is made up, so don't think I'm actually thinking of real sources, except for one here. There is actually a book called Traffic. I forget its subtitle, but it's a fascinating study of how we drive and why we do things that we drive, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what I want to do here is talk to you about how I might exit this whole paper that I would be writing about my thesis being cell phones while driving is not an activity that needs to be outlawed, an activity that needs to be outlawed. So I gave you my thesis, and in the last video I worked through the schematic and then the proof section. Now how would I close this? Alright, now I'm going to give you 8 closing strategies. I'll list them off as I talk about them, and then I'll try to apply them quickly with some sort of way to this writing. And then, so they're going to be more exit strategies, but these are 8 I can think of right off the bat. One being, oh, by the way, excuse me, here, let me backtrack a second. The thing you can always do as you exit is right at the beginning, just quickly sum up your thesis again and your main points. Again, this is following the notion of, as in public speaking, tell them what you're about to say, then say it, then remind them what you just said quickly. Down here, it's got to be quick. So just quickly remind your reader of what your thesis was and what the main points were, and then you can move on to one of these strategies. So the re-summing it up again can be coupled with one of these strategies to form a nice exit. Now the first actual technique is going to be, I call it a guess at why. A guess at why. So you might want to just say then, look, I've established my thesis. Now I don't have time to develop this as a new piece of analysis, but I can make a guess. And making guess is fine. Is fine in the exit. So you might say, well, if this is, if this thesis is true, which I try to establish that it is, why is it that at this point cell phone driving is still illegal? And you might say, well, it just seems to be a common sense notion that it's dangerous, and it might also be easy for policemen to enforce. So overall, you want to encourage safer driving practices, and in order to do that, you need to have a list of activities that you can sanction or actually empirically verify as happening, because you can see them happen, and then you can cite someone as far as like a police citation, and you can enforce it. So since it's enforceable, it just serves the general purpose of trying to make practice driving a safer practice in the long run. And that's just a suggestion. But seriously, if you're a police officer or like a city or a state or whatever, and you want to encourage safe driving, you have to have penalties for unsafe driving. And in order to make those penalties be penalties that stick, you have to have the activities that are being penalized to be very clear as far as like bad activities. So and those have to be fairly easily established too. So how many of you actually daydream when you drive a car? I mean, I think we all find ourselves daydreaming, but how is a cop going to stop you for that and say you were daydreaming, so I need to cite you? They just won't be able to do it. But if they see that cell phone up there, they can. Okay, so I'm just guessing at why it may be illegal in some states now. So you make a guess why. And you just tell your reader, hey, this is just a guess, but this is the place for me to do some guessing. So I'm going to try to, it's an interesting notion. That's one way to close it up. The second way would be maybe to call for further research. Okay, so you establish your thesis, and then you sit back and think, well, what else needs to be done about this? So one of the points I made in my paper is that this is not necessarily a dangerous activity because now it's hands-free, right? But because that technology is relatively new, well, let's just say it just happened in the last year or 2 years. Maybe the actual rigorous academic research as to whether or not that is in fact safer than the old-fashioned hold it in your hand thing, maybe that's equally distracting or whatnot. Or maybe if you actually did research on that, you would find out that it does reduce crest. So we need further research on this. Somehow you say, look, in the data I found that just, family cars, casual travel, a small commute, maybe a 30 minutes or less commute. And, we need to expand this to commercial driving, to aviation. Also, so you can think of creative ways to suggest a furthering of the research, an expansion of the scope. Okay, so number one strategy is, number one was a guess at why. Number two is suggest further research. Okay, number three is going to be the so what ending. All right, so what? And basically what you're trying to do in the ending is just try to tell your reader, this is why this matters, okay? Because can you imagine your reader reading your work and they follow you through and, you get your thesis, your data, your detail, your everything, right? And they actually end up saying, that's a nice point. But then they said, well, yeah, it really was nice, but you know what? So what? And you might be able to say, well, so what? Let me tell you why so what. Let me connect value to this. All right. So in that closing point, you would just be trying to establish the reason your thesis was valuable to be worked out and thought out. And you might say, well, look, if people will come to believe that you don't need to legislate this, then that's just one fewer piece of legislation that we have to worry about as a community with statutes and laws that we need to obey. So that's so what. So you try to show that this whole topic and the thinking that you put into the topic has some sort of real life value. Now listen, if in fact you realize at this point I can't think of any real life value, then you should have noticed that at the beginning I'd not have written on this worthless topic. But, at least it'll help you to get a grade in the class, which is, I can live with that. But, before you actually engage in actual writing as a career or as a truly developed avocation or as maybe a side job as a freelance, you have to establish the so what question up front. And it's often nice to refer to it in your closing for whatever particular piece you're writing to remind your reader that you had a reason for doing so. Now I'm going to cut this video up so it doesn't keep on getting longer on me, and I'll come back and discuss more exit strategies.